I once asked a teacher how I can read this graph, and they simply said, data away. Guys, today we're going to be learning about reading data off graphs. All right, good luck with your sums. Bye.
G'day guys, this is our first investigation into some data, and we can see we've got two great graphs there that illustrate data to us. Now, data's fantastic. Data helps us to challenge any of our own personal bias of things. So I like non-fiction biographies, but over here you can see this graph tells me that non-fiction isn't that popular. You can see that in the information that's just here. Okay, so you can see that non-fiction isn't that popular. So it challenges our bias, okay, our own personal belief systems, okay. So at the moment, I want you guys to consider how they've illustrated this data. Now we're going to pretend that graph B, the sector graph, the pie graph, is coloured in, and it has labels on there too. Which one illustrates the information better? Well, I can see on graph B there is no axes has not been labelled. No, each section hasn't been labelled, so it doesn't tell me that much information. I could probably determine which section is using the bar graph, but will that illustrate the information the best? So if I look over here, I can see the two most popular books very easily, or genres, are fiction and easy fiction. So fiction is the most popular. I've got a little information, a little masterclass down here that goes through almost dot point of what I want you to do when you're seeing graphs. And the first thing I want you to do is look at the information. Look at what the information or the graph, what information can you gather from that graph? And if we look over here, we can see this is Raver's library. And we can see the books and the different genres of books that are down the bottom and the number. Now, I can make up an assumption here and say that these are the amount of books that they've got in their library. Or I might say the amount of loans that they have out at the moment. So it might tell you which is the most popular. So the person who owns the library might say, well, I need to make sure that I'm buying more fiction and easy fiction because that's what the borrowers want. They want more of those books. So it's understanding the information that graph is trying to convey. Number two is being able to read the titles. Now, each graph should definitely have a title, and we can see Raver's library is our title. We can see that y-axis is labelled really nicely through there, and we can see the x-axis is labelled really nicely through there with the type of books, okay? So that helps me to understand more information that's on my graph. Without that information, the y and the x-axis, the graph is pretty much useless because it doesn't tell me anything. I want you to consider the intervals that the person's chosen. You can see here that they've chosen 50 in groups of 50. That's consistent. We want to make sure that that numbering system is consistent, that we're going up by 50s. We don't just stop and go, I'll go by 10s and I'll go by 20s. We want to make sure those interval systems are, we want to make sure they're going up evenly, okay? And sometimes the hardest part when you're choosing how to graph or present information on a graph is deciding what those intervals are going to be. How can I best illustrate my information? If I've got all my bar graphs right down the bottom here and there's not much information there, it's not going to be the best way of showing it. So I would need to fix up my intervals so that I've got a nice difference in my information or my data sets, as you can see there. I'm looking for patterns and trends, and one of the trends and patterns that we already found was that fiction is very popular. So having a good look for those trends that are in there. Looking for averages, we want to see where those mid-ranges are, we want to see where those midpoints are, so we can now say that reference books is below half, okay? Teaching books are below half. I can understand that, they're not the funnest things to read. So they're below half. We know that less than half of the amount of people borrowing those books, or the books that they have on file, are teachable books, so we need to make sure we understand that. We're looking for bold or highlighted information, and that just means that we're looking for the books, we're looking for titles, we're looking for that information, and then we need to understand the specific data that this graph is representing, okay? There's a few questions down through there you might like to try and answer once now that I've gone through that. I'm not going to go over those with you guys. All right, let's go to the next. Here we go, this is a different sort of graph, and I want you to have a look at what, we've got some missing information there, and what would you label these? So at the moment, it says all the data on this graph has been lost. Make it up for Professor Badger. Don't forget to name the graph and label the axes. So it's Professor Badger. So what do we want to say? He's gone up by 10s. This is the most popular. Could it be Badger? It could be the grades that he's given out because he's a professor. So it might be that he gave out a whole bunch of C's, he's given out some B's, he's given out some A's down through here. He might be a tough marker. There could be C pluses or C minuses even, or he could be given those sorts of grades. So it could be the grades that Professor Badger's giving out across those boards as well. So thinking about what information, what data can that graph be illustrating? It's just a simple bar graph. And here we got a horizontal bar graph now. We're going this way. And this says newspaper sales or subscription sales, and we're seeing some trends there. So we're looking for information. We've got a number of subscriptions here, which is great, and we've got each month. And you can quite clearly see that October is the most popular month for people renewing their subscriptions or getting subscription sales. We might need to think, okay, now if I'm the person that owns this newspaper, I might like to think, well, what's happening in December? Why is that so low? And of course, the big glaring thing in December is that it's Christmas and sometimes money can be a bit tight. So what can we do to start to improve our sales during December? Well, we could run a subscription a Christmas present for relatives. That could be a great Christmas gift. And we might see some change happening in this graph through there. So you can see straight away, this is going lots of information. Now you'll see here though, what does that mean? So I've got these little faint lines through here. I've got 900, 1,000, 1,100, and that's sitting roughly in the middle there. So I'm probably confident to say that that's 950. But that's where we run into trouble when we've got some of these larger intervals, is that it's not exact information. And that could be because we've got such a huge volume of sales in October. It doesn't matter if we're missing 1 or 2 sales. We're just having that good understanding that October is simply the busiest month, and September is the second most important. And then we can work our way through. We can look for our medium range here too. So we know we're sitting over here. So we're looking around here and we can see which months are below average, and they're the months that we will concentrate on. Okay, they're the months that we need to sort out. What can we do to our business model that will fix those? And we've got another graph here, and this one's coloured differently to represent those a little bit better. And you'll notice that there's 2 classes there, and that could be their favourite subjects per class. And you can see that the key here really gives that information there, and that's what graphing is about. How well does your graph illustrate your data? And you have to think about that when you've created your graph. There'll be a time when you need to create a graph, and then you need to be able to say to a friend, hey, what information can you tell from this graph? Is it clear, or do I need to change it? Nice even intervals. It's a good looking graph. So this is a great sales graph. This is called a line graph. And the great thing about a line graph is we can actually continue line graphs for an extended period of time. So you can continue that on well after that Friday. You can go into week 2 and you can see what that graph is doing. Are you having those low points, or are you having those high points? Okay, and you're looking at that daily roll sales. So we're looking at a bakery. Oh, yep, bakery. It's sitting at the top there. We're looking at bakeries, and we're selling a lot of rolls on a Monday. Okay. And we're not selling as many on a Thursday. So we might think about what could we do to our business model to improve that. But again, the great thing about a line graph is I can keep adding to this graph, and that's a continuation. It's hard to do with other graphs like a bar graph, because a lot of that information is finite and it's done. So it's in that time, whereas line graphs are fantastic for a continuing on model. And you see lots of line graphs in things like finance and how the Australian dollar is doing. So the final part of this video is to look at our understanding and to see where we are using that Mazzano self-assessment scale. So we're one of the 4 areas down below. I'm going to go through those with you very quickly now. So beginning is that we really don't understand the task. We're still unsure, and we may need to re-watch that video again. And the next stage is our developing. So we've learnt it, we understand parts of it, but there are still questions that need to go. We've still got questions before we get to that better understanding. So the next one is our competent. This means that we understand it quite well. We can work independently, but there is still, and we can problem solve by ourselves. But there may not be some. There may be some areas that we're still struggling with. And finally, we're at that proficient stage. This means that we understand it very, very well. We're getting most of our questions correct, and we could actually hold our own masterclass that we could actually teach other people how to do this concept as well. Okay, very important that we look at our Marzano self-assessment. Whereabouts are we in relation to our understanding?